Hello everyone, welcome to another interesting and informative session of the Analyst brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi. In today's session, we'll discuss 7 important articles as featured in the Hindu and Indian Express for your comprehensive understanding of the current affairs explained to you in the easiest language possible. The topics are as follows. From your analysis section, in the first topic, we are actually going to discuss about how there is a dire need for our country to actually transition away from molecular based energy production to electron based energy production in the future. Then, in the second topic, we are actually going to discuss about the new Solid Waste Management Rules 2026, which has been notified by the Government of India. Then, keeping in mind the approaching prelims 2026, we have come up with the prelims pointer, where we are going to discuss some factual provisions of 5 very important topics which has high probability to be reflected in the prelims 2026. So, stay tuned. The lead editorial, which is highly praiseful of China's journey, actually showcases that how China has registered a magnanimous rise in electron-based energy production, the challenges which we are actually facing for such electron-based or renewable energy production in our country, and how there is an immediate need of carbon capturing and utilization techniques as well as carbon emission trading in our country. The issue which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of energy infrastructure. So that editorial basically tells us that how for more than a century the chimneys, the factories, the various trucks, all these integral components of supply chains, they were actually functioning on molecular based energy production, which according to the editorial consists of oil, gas, liquefied petroleum gas, coal, biofuels, etc., where we basically burn them or incinerate them, and the equivalent amount of heat or energy which is produced, it actually puts things into motion. For example, you actually put petrol in your internal combustion engine based vehicle, and because of the burning of that, it basically starts driving, right? So basically the molecules which are combusted directly in engines, boilers and furnaces. However, as per the editorial, even in this section we have actually seen a bit of centralization. For example, the coal has actually shifted from on-site combustion to a more centralized power generation. In this context, we can actually refer to the Central Electricity Authority, according to which coal still dominates India's energy mix. For example, it still contributes to 55% of our country's total energy mix and 73% of the total power generation in our country. However, the article suggests that now the modern day economies, they are actually transitioning away from such molecular based energy production to a more electron based energy production, where the electrons are actually delivered by a more centralized grid. So in this context, you guys can recall how we have studied that we actually use silicon diode for in your photovoltaic cells, where they actually convert the photons of sunlight into a renewable source of energy. Or for example, how we actually use electrolyzers, which ends up breaking the H2O or water atom and gives us a green hydrogen, another form of renewable energy. So such electron based energy production, where there are more electrons, it is obvious that there will be higher automation and thus more easier decarbonization of any particular sector of the economy. The article says that how this particular electron based electric production actually has much higher efficiency as well. For example, the electric motors, they actually convert 90% of the input energy into a meaningful or useful energy, in contrast to a internal combustion engine based kind of a production, where it actually converts less than 35% of the total input into a useful energy. So for example, if you are actually putting 10 liters of petrol in your vehicle, it is giving you equivalent amount of energy which is equal to 3.5 liter only. So the article suggests that the countries which are actually going to transition fastest from such molecular based energy production to a more electron or renewable energy production, they are actually going to kind of expedite the decarbonization of their sectors, basically leading to the decline of carbon dioxide emission. Because of that, they will actually face a lot of supply chain advantages because various countries have set certain climate change norms which they are going to achieve. Because these countries are actually going to have this supply chain advantage, don't you think they will actually attract more capital? And by the virtue of that, they will actually generate more employment. And our country is in the dire need of employment, as we can see from the data which has been provided to us by the Economic Survey 2025, where it says that how our country is actually facing the demographic dividend, where more than 2 by 3rd of our population is actually in the working age group of 15 to 49 years. And to sustain this demographic dividend, there is actually a need of generation of 78.5 lakhs non-farm jobs every year till the year of 2030 to actually sustain this demographic dividend which we have. The article suggests that how China has actually taken a kind of a decisive lead in this direction, where it has actually transitioned very swiftly to electron-based production. For example, China's almost 47% of the total energy which it is using in the industry is actually coming from the renewable energy sources. In contrast to that, 34% in EU, 32% in USA and only 27% in our country. Now look closely here, there is a very interesting data. If we see in overall economy context, China, USA, European Union, all of them have only 1 by 3rd of the total energy share in their economy, which is actually coming from the renewable energy or electron-based electrification. But the article suggests that how China actually deliberately channels far more electrons or far more sources into the renewable energy into its industry than its peer, because it is a kind of a strategic move. To understand that, we will actually kind of just succinctly understand the concept of carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is nothing but a kind of a climate policy tool of European Union, where European Union says that, let's say for example, there was a manufacturer in the European Union. The name of the company is TO. TO basically produces steel or basically creates ship, and for that purpose it actually requires steel. When it was actually creating those steels, it was actually generating carbon dioxide emission. So let's say for example, there is a kind of a threshold which has been set by the European Union, and this company was actually kind of producing more carbon dioxide emission than that threshold, which is kind of violative of the Fit for 55 pledge which European Union has taken, where European Union is saying that to actually achieve the larger target of Paris Agreement 2015, under which we are actually going to reduce the global warming up to 2 degrees Celsius by 2100 or further up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. For that purpose, the European Union has taken this pledge where it is saying that it is going to cut down its carbon dioxide emission by almost 55%. From which year level? From the year level of 1990 by the year of 2030 itself. But such company TO, which manufactures ship and for that purpose is actually producing steel, and in the production of that steel, because there is a large scale utilization of carbon dioxide emission, it is actually breaking down this threshold which has been set by the European Union on this company. European Union says no problem. You actually pay us a little bit of money under the emission trading scheme which we have, right? So that we can actually utilize this money to actually invest in the creation of more green technologies. So don't you think it had actually become a kind of a non-profitable for this company? So this company thought that why not, let's kind of outsource the carbon intensive steel production to a company which is actually based in a country which has less stringent climate policy. For example, let's say a company name is Tata Steel and it is actually based in our country where there is no nationwide carbon tax which is actually applied on these corporates or industries. So basically they started importing such kind of carbon intensive products from these countries, outsourcing that. European Union says no problem. Under carbon border adjustment mechanism, just give us a list of all the inputs which has incurred to make this ship. If you have, let's say, utilized the steel for that purpose, There might have been some carbon emission which has been generated and you are importing that back to European Union. So you are basically required to buy a carbon certificate now. Don't you think that this cost of carbon certificate which has to be paid by this shipping country, they will actually start putting it on the non-EU exporter like Tata Steel, and thus our products are actually going to become costlier in the European Union. Thus some of you will argue that, sir, but recently we have signed free trade agreement with the European Union and it is mother of all free trade agreement. So basically because of that there will be tariff reduction on our products, right? So basically our products are actually going to become cheaper, and by the virtue of that they will actually become much more competitive, because the basic law of economy says that if the cost of product actually declines, its demand is going to increase. But here is a kind of a catch-22 situation. This free trade agreement is not applicable on this carbon border adjustment mechanism because it is not a type of tariff, rather it is a climate policy tool. So all the benefits which we are actually going to incur under the free trade agreement is actually going to be nullified by the imposition of this carbon border adjustment mechanism. For example, in European Union, we actually kind of export 22% of our total merchandise export. 25% of the total export product which we actually kind of send to European Union, they fall under this bracket of carbon border adjustment mechanism. What it will lead to? It will lead to decline in the steel and aluminium export. For example, to actually produce 1 ton of steel using the coal based, molecular based kind of blast furnace route, it actually kind of generates 2.4 tons of carbon dioxide. So for that, the kind of the amount which will be required to pay to actually kind of buy these carbon certificates, our profit margin is actually going to significantly decline by 16 to 22%. Now listen very carefully. Let's say for example, these European Union countries were actually going to follow a strategy called as China plus one strategy, where to actually kind of reduce down their import reliance on this one country China, they were actually trying to diversify their import basket, and they might have been looking India as a kind of a good alternative market with good quality products. But now there is a problem. The Indian products are actually become to be on the kind of costlier side thanks to this carbon border adjustment mechanism. But does the same will be applicable on China? No. Why? Because it has actually kind of majority of its production is coming from kind of electron based production, renewable energy production. So its product will not be charged under carbon border adjustment mechanism, and thus it will still remain cheaper. Now the question which shall arise in your mind is that what has been the China's playbook to actually kind of achieve such high level of electron based energy? And in this particular concept, the China was actually a kind of a visionary. They passed a kind of a renewable energy law 20 years back, almost 2 decades back in 2005, where they actually started identifying the important wind and solar farms which they can create at large scale sites which were kind of uninhabitable at that point of time, like Gansu, Inner Mongolia, Jiangsu, etc. And there they actually started deploying their state-owned enterprises with single point agenda to create renewable energy infrastructure. Like for example, National Development and Reform Commission, your National Energy Administration, the public sector banks were also kind of aligned for this purpose, where these public sector enterprises, they started providing heavy collateral free loans for long gestation period, which is actually required for the creation of such renewable energy projects. For example, China also heavily invested in its technology upgradation as well. As per the data of fiscal year 25, China actually invested approximately $500 billion in research and development, specifically in the sectors of renewable energy sectors, which is almost equivalent to 2.7% of its GDP. In sharp contrast to that, as per Economic Survey 2026 released recently, India only spends 0.6% of its total GDP, which actually amounts to less than $100 billion. Then it further expanded these renewable energy projects through programs like Belt and Road Initiative. There took place a kind of a government-backed electron transition of the economy which took place, where it actually kind of visualize the need of the various critical minerals, like for example your lithium, your silicon diodes, and it actually started investing in the exploration of these raw materials, up to $19.4 billion of investment only in the exploration. Because of the virtue of that, China almost controls now 87% of the rare earth element processing in the world and almost 58% of the world's lithium refining. The lithium, which is actually kind of imperative to actually create these kind of electron based motors, right? However, we are still reliant on these internal combustion engine based motors. As per the Ministry of Mines report 2023, till today, India has only explored 10% of its original geological potential and mined only 2% of its potential reserves. Even if our private sector actually wants to invest in that, the kind of the long gestation period which prevails, the kind of the lack of exploration data which exists, or for example, the lack of technology with large scale firms in our country, all of that act as a kind of a deterrent, because there does not kind of exist that much of a profit margin in actually exploration and production of these raw materials. In sharp contrast to that, the public sector units of China, they actually focused on the sunrise sectors of the future. For example, creation of photovoltaic cell. Almost 80% of photovoltaic cells in our country comes from where? From China. Right now, they are actually investing 55% of the global energy investment, where they are building these projects with a single point agenda, and that is build at cost mentality. And they are basically, the editorial says that how they are reserving the molecule based energy production only in those sectors where there is no immediate alternative, like for example, small scale handicraft industries of China. So now the question arises that what is the status of our country's energy sector? One thing which we can very clearly understand is that with increasing population, it is very obvious that we are actually going to have increase in the power demand, where currently we are the third largest energy and oil consumer in the world, where we are the fourth largest refiner and liquefied petroleum gas importer globally. The energy demand of our country, as per an article which was written by the Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, is actually going to grow 2.5 times by the year of 2047, and the total global incremental demand which will take place in the energy by the year of 2047, a quarter of that, 25% of that will actually come from one country, and that is us. So while our energy demand is actually significantly increasing, there is a kind of a paradox which we face, where instead of transitioning kind of swiftly to the electron based production, we are still heavily investing in molecular energy. We are still actually kind of putting impetus on oil and gas sector, which is actually going to cover 1 million kilometer square of the coverage by 2030, where we have actually kind of invited more private investment in this sector by actually reducing the no-go area by 99%, where the government is actually further streamlining the licensing to actually explore more such oil and gas projects under the open acreage licensing policy. And thus the acreage area has actually doubled from 8% in 2010 to 16% in 2025. And this is what the editorial is heavily critical of. It says that how our industrial electron, right, basically the kind of the energy which is utilized in the industries of our country, out of which what is the fraction which is coming from renewable energy? It is only 25%. And green electron just contributes 7 to 8% of the total energy consumption in our country. However, the Economic Survey 2026 would like to differ from this perspective, where there is a whole section which has been dedicated by this year's Economic Survey 2026, where they have actually highlighted the steps which has been taken by our country in this electron-based electricity production. For example, in solar energy, it says that how there has been 45-fold increase. There was 3 gigawatt of solar energy production in 2040, and it has almost reached to 135 gigawatt by 2025. So we are saying that by the year of 2030, 500 gigawatt of production will be come from renewable energy. Out of that, 135 by 2025 is actually coming from solar energy itself, thanks to the kind of the impetus on rooftop solar panel installation under your Pradhan Mantri Surya Ghar mission. Or for example, where we are actually trying to solarize the panels of the kind of the pumps which are utilized by the farmers under your Pradhan Mantri Kusum Yojana, where we are actually developing solar parks and ultra mega solar power projects. 55 solar parks with a combined sanction capacity of almost 39,000 megawatt has been approved. Then new solar power schemes like, for example, Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Mahabhiyan and Dharti Aba Janjati Gram Utkarsh Abhiyan, where we are basically kind of installing such solar panel based street lights even in the tribal areas. Then this solar energy based production has also been included in the production linked incentive scheme. In wind energy, keep this in mind, the data is very important, quoted in economic survey, that how wind has the fourth highest, our country has the fourth highest wind installed capacity in the world. And almost close to 5 gigawatt energy was added in the last year of 2025 itself, where we are not only focusing solely on the wind projects but also on various kind of hybrid projects which are under implementation. And for that purpose, to actually target offshore kind of wind projects, we are also actually providing viability gap funding. Then the impetus on bioenergy, National Bioenergy Program, Gobardhan scheme, installed capacity of biomass power and kind of co-generation projects has actually increased significantly. Then the installed capacity of waste to energy projects has increased as well. Then, as we were discussing, the National Green Hydrogen Mission. The target is to achieve 5 million metric ton of green hydrogen annually by the year of 2030. For that purpose, 3 green hydrogen hubs has been designated. Deen Dayal Port Authority in Gujarat, VO Chimbaramnagar Port Authority in Tamil Nadu and Paradeep Port Authority in Odisha. Just a small question to all of you here. Can anybody tell me, there is a hint in this particular slide itself, who actually created steam Swadeshi steam navigation company during the Swadeshi movement in the region of Tamil Nadu in 1905? Moving ahead. So what is the suggestion which has been offered by the today's editorial? The today's editorial suggests that how, as a country, we need to actually invest more on carbon capture and utilization and storage kind of initiatives, where it suggests for flue gas desulfurization projects, or for example direct air capturing projects. So it basically says that, see, what we can do, we can either capture the carbon which is being produced by our companies, right, and then we can actually utilize it, right, to further kind of greenify the projects. Or it suggests that, let's say for example, there is a company and this company is actually exceeding the greenhouse gas emission. Okay? So let's say for example, when Tata Steel is actually making the steel for the European Union company, then it is actually exceeding this much of carbon dioxide emission. Let's say that is around 1 ton of carbon dioxide. For that purpose, this Tata Steel company can actually purchase a carbon credit certificate. This carbon credit certificate, for that purpose, this particular company will pay, let's say, 1000 rupees. Now let's say there is a small scale handicraft industry at one part of our country which has actually kind of non-utilized the kind of the threshold which exists, and it has actually kind of saved 1 billion ton of CO2 carbon emission. So basically they have a kind of balanced each other, but because it has actually kind of invested in this carbon capture and utilization storage initiatives, then this 1000 rupees will actually be transferred to this particular company. And this regulation of trading activity will be done under the Energy Conservation Act of 2022, and it will be actually be monitored by the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. Then the economic survey suggests that how the kind of these companies, they shall actually prepare a very specific chart for the calculation of the total carbon emission, as well as then how we can actually kind of transition towards utilization of this CCUS and the CTS, carbon trading scheme as well. For that, there shall be development of a sector specific energy, where we can actually kind of devise potential for energy efficiency, fuel switch, non-fossil fuel energy. Then we can assess the available technology and associated cost of their implementation. Then we can actually create industry specific targets, where there will be a kind of a estimation of baseline GEI or greenhouse gas emission intensity. And the economic survey suggests that how the government has already set such greenhouse gas emission intensity thresholds for 4 sectors: aluminium, cement, alkali, as well as the production of pulp paper. And we need to assign such minimum target to the most efficient unit and the highest target to the most inefficient units. For example, in this case, most inefficient unit is the Tata company. And whatever the money, the incentive which this company will get, they will actually invest more on such green technologies. So over a period of time, we can actually balance the total carbon dioxide emission which is taking place in our country, and thus we can also get the incentives which is actually being attracted by China because it is transitioning to the electron based energy. So very interesting article. A good portion of economic survey has been covered as well. Try to attempt this question and we move forward to the next news, where the Union Ministry of Environment has actually notified the new Solid Waste Management Rules 2026, which will be implemented from the 1st of April 2026 to promote the reduction, recycle and reuse of the solid waste in our country. The solid waste management, which forms an important component of your GS3 paper under the larger theme of environment conservation. So let's start our discussion by understanding what do we mean by solid waste. The article says that how before the industrial revolution, the large number of waste actually fell in the category of being organic, right? Where it was, thus it was very easily disposable as well. And it was usually found in the low-lying areas and thus kind of naturally integrated with the geochemical cycle. However, thanks to the industrial revolution, there was a surge of a wave of industrially manufactured goods and materials, like for example, metal, glass, plastic, paper, etc., which were inorganic in the nature. What do we mean by inorganic? Basically, they are highly non-biodegradable, where they cannot be easily decomposed by the agents such as, for example, bacteria, fungi, yeast, etc. Like for example, your plastic or microplastic, right? So, thanks to the kind of the large scale urban expansion which has taken place, the growing culture of consumerism, or for example, the large scale rapid growth of the population which is taking place, all that have resulted in the complex challenge for the solid waste management, which is actually being pinpointed from various sources, like for example, residential and commercial areas. Or for example, let's say you might be watching this lecture on some phone or laptop. If that will become non-functional tomorrow, don't you think you are going to discard it? That is your electronic waste. Or for example, the hazardous plastic waste, which is all around us. Thus, when we have understood that there is a kind of a growing threat of such solid waste, the idea is to assess what is the intensity of this threat. For that purpose, let's refer to the report which was published in 2024 by the Central Pollution Control Board, according to which our country, it generates 1.85 lakh tons of waste daily, out of which 96% is collected, 61% is treated, and 21% of this waste is actually landfilled. So you guys can actually recall the mountains of the Gazipur, right? It has also become a kind of a tourist destination thanks to social media. So in our country, by the year of 2023, an average person was actually generating 3.4 kg of solid waste on daily basis. However, just in 2 years time, it actually kind of doubled to 0.7 kg per person per day by the year of 2025. And if we keep on producing such solid waste at such high level of intensity, we are very easily going to surpass Germany, which is at right now 4th position in the terms of solid waste generation by the year of 2030 itself. Keep this in mind that all this magnanimous amount of solid waste generation which is taking place around you, only 50% of this is actually being treated. So we are actually being able to collect and treat almost 50% of this waste, while 50% of this waste is either lying in the ponds or some aquatic ecosystem around you, and thus kind of declining the blue and the green spaces which exist. It is kind of filling such kind of sacred rivers of our country. So basically it is actually, there is a kind of a huge problem. Now keep this in mind that there is a specific article which we referred, which was actually published by the Clean India Journal. It actually classified the composition of solid waste in our country, according to which total 51% of solid waste is actually in the nature of biodegradable organic matter. So less thing to worry about. 17% of them is actually made up of recyclable material, but then the problem is that whether we are able to collect and treat it or not. 30 to 40% of them actually contains ash content, and thus kind of indirectly contributing to the PM 2.5 and PM 10 pollution which we are facing. 3 to 6% is actually being kind of generated from the paper making. And now pay attention, the inert materials, right, which are highly kind of non-biodegradable, like glass, plastic, metals, they only constitute 3 to 6%. However, when it comes to the collection and the treatment of it, that is the major kind of an area where we are faulting. For example, if you look at the electronic waste which is generated in our country, which is approximately 2 million tons per annum, only 22% of that is recycled. The highest contribution actually comes from Maharashtra, which contributes to the most of these 2 million tons of e-waste, where the Maharashtra generates 20% of country's e-waste but recycle only 12 to 15% of that. And we are talking about one of the developed states of our country. So just imagine what might be happening with the kind of the underdeveloped states, where what kind of a infrastructure would be existing for the collection and the treatment of such waste. And thus it actually creates a problem of microplastic as well, where such inert materials, when they are actually exposed to the UV rays, they actually go to a process of fragmentation, converting into microplastic whose particle size is less than 5 mm, like polyethylene, polypropylene, nylon, etc. They can actually bioaccumulate in our body, such as for example bisphenol A, which can actually lead to cardiovascular diseases, obesity, infertility, also causing cancer. The same non-treatment has actually led to collection of such huge Pacific garbage patch which actually exist, where according to the Convention on Biological Diversity, it is actually significantly impacting more than 600 aquatic species. The chemical accumulation is actually impacting the flora and the fauna which prevails in the region of ocean, thanks to the neurological and harmonical imbalances. 1 lakh plus marine mammals die every year. So it's not like that such huge issue of solid waste is only impacting the human life, it is also significantly impacting the biodiversity as well. It is basically altering their habitation structure. It is also change in the kind of the light intensity. So for example, let's say there are certain fishes who actually kind of live in the lower areas of ocean. But now because of the existence of this garbage patch over, the sunlight is not reaching till there. Don't you think it is actually going to significantly impact such fauna at the lower level of ocean, because the photosynthesis will not take place? Don't you think mixing of such plastic with the soil will actually make the soil more compact, more hardened, and thus the roots will not be able to penetrate, declining its soil fertility? It will actually kind of reduce the dissolved oxygen capacity in the water bodies, in the aquatic bodies, and thus the biological oxygen demand and chemical oxygen demand in such aquatic system is going to significantly increase, leading to what? Eutrophication. All of these issues are further going to aggravate, and for that purpose we can refer to the Plastic Overshoot Day report which was released by the IThe Earth Action, according to which 220 million tons of plastic waste will be created in 2025. 50% of the world population is already living in areas where plastic waste has exceeded the managing capacity. In 2024 itself, there existed more than 117 days where there was a plastic overshoot. So basically we generated more plastic than we could actually collect. 70 million tons of plastic waste actually ends up in natural environment. And remember, just 12 countries are responsible for the world's mismanaged plastic waste. Top 5 actually includes our country as well. China is the first, USA, third is India, fourth is Brazil, and the fifth is Mexico. And by the year of 2060, our total kind of the consumption of plastic waste is actually going to increase to 160 million ton, out of which 128 million tons of that will be actually waste, and we will own the leakage to the aquatic environment will almost be 70 million tons by the year of 2060. Now there shall a question which shall arise in your mind that sir, ये सब तो ठीक है, But why waste is winning in our country? Why we are unable to, kind of significantly handle this issue of solid waste management? The first and foremost is that the article suggests that the waste generation actually ends up outpacing the solid waste management infrastructure which prevails in our country. So for example, let's say as per the Central Pollution Control Board, keep this in mind, Central Pollution Control Board is a very important statutory body and it was created under the Water Prevention Act of 1974. So according to CPCB, there exists around 4,000 plus solid waste management infrastructure in our country, plants in our country. Can you guys guess how many of these 4,000 plus solid waste management plants actually run at their 100% capacity? Less than 25%. The question shall arise that, okay, why such existence of infrastructure is not efficiently being utilized by the municipalities? Because there exist financial constraints which are faced by these municipalities, which actually impacts the entire chain from the waste collection to the advanced treatment facilities. Keep this in mind that when it comes to the municipalities in our country, they are highly dependent on the transfer of funds from state and the central government. For example, the municipalities in our country, they actually contribute to 2/3 or 66% of the GDP. However, right, their control on the entire tax revenue is actually a meager, abysmal 1%. So they don't have that much of a fund to actually invest in solid waste management infrastructure, leading to what? The use of outdated technology and inadequate workforce training. Let's take another example. You guys might have heard about Bandicoot. What is Bandicoot? Bandicoot is a kind of an indigenous robotic machine which was built and deployed by the Kerala government. The idea was that basically they wanted to end the issue of manual scavenging, and for that purpose they actually wanted to automate the process of sewer cleaning, manhole cleaning, etc. Now tell me, how many of such indigenous robotic machines to clean the sewers called as Bandicoot you have actually seen in tier 2 and tier 3 cities? Then the major problem is that there exists a lack of decentralized solid waste management in our country. So for example, let's say that there is a specific area from where there is a huge amount of tons of plastic waste which is being generated. But the whole process is centralized through a chain, leading to a collection, passing to, let's say for example, a contractor. The contractor will ultimately pass it to the solid waste management plan. Instead of that, don't you think we can actually create such small solid waste management plants near the such high risky zones or high kind of plastic creation areas itself? Then the CPCB report 2024, which we are referring for this particular article, it specifically says that the people of our country does not have civic sense. Take where it says that despite the initiatives and social engineering under the various initiatives, let's say for example Swachh Bharat, Swachh Mission, even despite all of this, the people are still not throwing, let's say for example, the waste on the designated areas. Even they do not follow the kind of the segregation which has actually been kind of identified for them. Keep this in mind that such plastic waste, such kind of solid waste actually contributes very significantly to the carbon dioxide emission as well, thus also jeopardizing our larger Panchamrit target. So, taking the cognizance of this, the government has come up with solid waste management rules of 2026. It has been kind of listed by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change under the provisions of Environment Protection Act of 1986. Now, this is very important for prelims also, so pay attention. It says that the waste generator must segregate waste now in 4 streams. So, earlier there existed 2 streams. You guys might have seen the dustbin also. Wet waste, that is biodegradable kitchen waste. Dry waste, which includes plastic, paper, metal, glass, inert materials basically. Now there are 2 new categories. One is sanitary waste, used diapers or sanitary pads. Or for example, special care waste, which includes your paint cans, bulbs, expired medicines and batteries. So maybe we can recycle them and use them, right? So actually, kind of transitioning toward electron based electricity production. Also, Now there will be identification of bulk waste generators. Who are these bulk waste generators? As we were saying, why not to bring these solid waste management plants near these bulk waste generators? So let's say for example there is a building with floor area more than 20,000 meter square, or there is an area where water consumption is more than 40,000 liter, or electricity generation of 100 kg per day waste or more than that, or such kind of bulk waste generators like societies, malls, colleges, hostels, kind of residential welfare associations. All of such bulk waste generators shall segregate the waste in these four categories at the source itself and hand the recyclable material to the authorities, which is basically your fourth category. Now you are like, sir, ye sab to theek hai, but who will monitor this? The government is saying that we are going to create an artificial intelligence based centralized portal to track the waste generation, collection and processing. ठीक है? And through that the government is basically going to implement a polluter pay principle, where if you are not following these directives of the government, then you are actually required to pay environmental compensation for the improper waste handling. ठीक है? Is there something which we can do more? First and foremost is, you guys can recall that when we were discussing about the concept of right to repair months back, we talked about the inclusion of repairability factor in the design and procurement policies itself, so that we can actually curtail down the electronic waste which we are generating. Further, we can actually sensitize the people about the mother earth through these Prakriti mascot to actually do social engineering. And the biggest change for that is the next generation. So we can actually take that Prakriti mascot, right, launch under the life mission to the schools first. We can actually put more research and development to actually kind of create such biotechnology kind of things, like for example idonola cyclinsins, which can actually degrade the plastic itself. Then further we can actually kind of put impetus on private public partnership for increased fund allocation to the municipalities, where let's say for example if there is a company in a particular area and the company is required to pay the corporate social responsibility of 2% of the profit, why not to directly kind of take this profit and this company and make it responsible under the trusteeship model of Gandhiji to actually kind of tackle the issue of waste in that region. Further, to create on-site composting and waste to wealth plant, we can also borrow the leaf from some global best practices, like for example the China's Hangzhou, which has actually become a zero waste city. We can actually include this concept in our country as well, right? Also Australia, we can follow the model of that, where they have actually kind of banned single-use plastic, straws, cutlery, micro beads in shampoo completely. So we can also take that thing. Keep this way forward in your mind when you are writing this particular question. And now we are going to specifically move towards the prelims kind of a specific section, where we are actually going to cover a very important article which has appeared today, and it can actually lead to a lot of statements creation in the prelims examination. The article basically talks about the PIL which was actually kind of filed in the Delhi High Court, that actually asks whether the law can require the viable frozen embryos to be destroyed rather than donated, even when actually the couples consent on both sides. Take it. So to actually oppose what it describes as a kind of a blanket prohibition on altruistic, voluntary, consent-based donation to infertile couple, the plea challenges the provisions of Assisted Reproductive Technology or ART Act 2021, which, now listen to this very carefully, which permits the embryos to be created using the donor sperm and the donor eggs, but at the same point of time prohibit the donation of unused frozen embryos for reproductive use by another couple, right? So for example, in our country there is a huge section of people who are actually facing the issue of fertility, right? So what they do, they actually goes to some kind of let's say for example hospitals, where they actually avail such assisted reproductive technologies, right, where there is a kind of a donor sperm which is actually kind of fused with the oocyte or the eggs of the particular lady in kind of an artificial condition, right? And from there the word basically comes from called as like a glass, right? And that is why it is in vitro fertilization which takes place, right? So here the egg is fertilized by the sperm outside the body in a lab kind of a condition, and then this actually develops the zygote. The zygote then transitions into development of an embryo which consists of 46 chromosomes, 23 from women and 23 from men, and then this embryo is actually placed into the uterus of the mother. So these are basically the kind of the steps which actually takes place. The collection of egg from the ovaries, the sperm collection which takes place, then the transfer of this sperm into the ovaries, right, development of an embryo, and then transfer of this embryo and ultimately the pregnancy test which takes place 10 to 14 days later. So this is the in vitro fertilization technique which we are actually discussing under this Assisted Reproductive Technology Act of 2021. What are the provisions of the act? First and foremost, for the registration of the clinics. So all such clinics which are providing this facility of assisted reproductive technology, they shall compulsorily register with a national register of bank and clinics, which actually act as a kind of a central base for all the essential legal operation. Now there are certain specific conditions which has been laid down under the act for donors and the service eligibility. So any such sperm donor or wiki donor, that person can be in the age of 21 to 55 years. Any person who is basically donating the egg or oocytes, that person can be within the age of 23 to 55 years. Now keep this in mind that any such female donor, listen to this very carefully, must be ever married and shall be having at least one living child whose age shall be less than 3 years. Such donor who is actually donating the oocyte can actually donate only one in her entire life, but during that process a maximum amount of 7 eggs or 7 oocytes can be taken from her, right? So let's say for example there was a doctor, that person took 7 oocytes. One of such oocytes has been used by the doctor and 6 of them has been crypto-preserved or basically frozen for a long period of time. Keep this thing in your mind. Now let's say there was a child which is actually born through this process, right? What is the right of child? So the right of child is that that person will be legally recognized as the biological child of the commissioning parents, right? And the donors, they do not have any parental right over the child whatsoever, and that was basically the kind of the issue which was highlighted in this movie called as Mimi. So we have understood the provisions of the act. Now what is this issue which has arisen? The act basically says, the section 28 of the act, which basically governs the storage and the handling of the embryos. So there is a specific section, clause 2, section 28 clause 2, which says that embryos can be stored up to 10 years, right? So let's say for example there was a fusion of the sperm and the oocytes, and that basically led to kind of development of an embryo. Such embryo can actually be frozen for till what time? Till the age of 10 years. What if the parents, they actually gave birth to one baby but they did not return for any other baby? What can happen? So in the case of it is not being used, it can be either donated for the research or it shall be allowed to perish, right? But let's say for example a PIL is being filed that if there exists such a frozen embryo, right? There is me and my wife and we have basically kind of created that embryo. We are saying that yes, we have the consent. There is, let's say, a friend of ours, and these friends basically want that frozen embryo, which is in a very healthy, kind of a quality. The law says that no, even if there exists consent from both the sides, from the donors and the acceptors, even then, there exists a kind of a blanket ban on the altruistic consent-based donation to infertile couple. So various specialists says that okay, at certain conditions you are actually allowing certain technologies, but then you are restricting some others. Remember that infertility actually impacts 27 to 30 million people in our country, and thus it is a very serious issue. However, in the act itself there exists certain exception. So for example, Art Act 2021, it do allow altruistic donation from sperms and eggs in 2 conditions. 1, donor is actually assisting the in vitro fertilization process, or there is taking place a double donor IVF, where the embryo is actually created from the donor sperm and the donor oocytes. In that case, it is actually allowed, where it is actually then transferred to the commissioning couple. So in this case, there is a kind of a complete artificial semination which is taking place entirely outside the body, where even the sperm has been taken, even let's say for example the eggs has been taken from two different donors. They have merged that, and now that is being put into the commissioning couple's body. This is something, in this case you can actually use the frozen sperm or frozen eggs. But again, if I am saying that yes, I have, let's say for example we have such embryo which has developed, can we transfer this embryo? No. So basically, remember, donation of crypto-preserved embryo is not allowed. But yes, indeed, if there is, let's say for example, donation of frozen sperm or frozen eggs, this is allowed. That is basically the catch. So in such case, where such double donor IVF is taking place, where we are basically using a frozen sperm and frozen egg, keep this in mind, there will obviously be no genetic linkage to either of the parents for sure, the commissioning couple. Okay? So remember these distinctions, remember the provisions of this act. It was part of an explained article, and we move forward to the next news. Where we are actually going to cover a very important scheme, and that is Member of Parliament Local Area Development Fund scheme, which has actually been caught in a controversy. First, let's examine what is a controversy. The controversy says that last month the BJP actually alleged that 3 Congress MPs from Rajasthan, they have actually ended up misusing their MPLAD Local Area Development Fund. The party claimed that, let's say there is a Brijendra Singh, there is a Rahul Kaswan, or there is a Sanjana Jatav. So they actually come from different, kind of provinces from the region of Rajasthan. But they actually kind of used their area specific fund for the development work in the Kaithal district of Haryana, instead of utilizing the funds for development work within their constituencies in Rajasthan. So BJP basically argued that it actually ran contrary to the core objective of MPLAD. It raises concern about the appropriateness of the allocating public funds across the state boundaries. So basically the MPs are not basically focusing on their development of their constituencies, rather they are giving these funds to some other candidate. Why? Maybe because there is some by-election which is going to take place here. Now the question which shall arise in your mind is that, can this kind of a transfer of funds which were allocated to this particular constituency recommended by MP, can this be transferred to other constituency or development work in other constituency? A very important statement can be made here. So let's try to understand the MPLAD scheme. The MPLAD scheme, which was originally initiated in the year of 1993, is an entirely central sector scheme, and the funds are released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. What is the corpus of fund? It is 5 crore rupees per annum, released by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation in 2 equal installments. Remember, today's editorial itself says that it can be used only for durable community assets, like for example, creation of roads, schools, health infrastructure. Now let's say I was serving as an MP and a person came to me, and that person says that, sir, I do not have, let's say, a toilet in my house. Can you please make it under your MPLAD scheme? Now, this amounts to a kind of a private asset and not a kind of a community asset in this case. But if this particular person falls in the category of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or any disadvantaged group, then yes, indeed, even such private assets can be commissioned. Then the MPLAD Guideline 2023 specifically says that such member of parliament can recommend eligible work up to 50 lakh rupees per year from this 5 crore corpus, even outside the constituency or the state. So not only in that constituency, but even outside the state as well, except in the cases on natural calamities, where they can actually, kind of recommend up to 1 crore rupees of the fund. So for example, if I am a MP from a constituency which falls in the state of, let's say, Karnataka, but there has been a kind of a huge cyclone which has impacted the coastal area of Kerala, then yes, indeed, for the relief work of that, I can actually allocate funds from my MPLAD fund as well. And this is now taking place not only beyond the constituency but beyond the state itself. Also, one thing which you might be hearing again and again, why these MPs are recommending the work. Keep this in mind that MPs can only recommend the work. They do not have any role in the execution or the handling of the fund. This responsibility is entirely the prerogative of the district authority or you people as a district magistrate. One more motivation: sanctioning, executing, monitoring works which are recommended by the Member of Parliament. Keep this in mind that at least 15% of the funds, so one year UPSC asked that a specified portion of each MP fund shall benefit SC/ST population. Yes, indeed. 15% funds for SC and 7.5 for ST areas. The district authority must inspect at least 10% of all works under implementation to see that whether the works are actually being, kind of finalized at the grassroots level or not. Are they lapsable in the nature? No, they are non-lapsable and they can be carried forward. So, and the unused funds cannot be carried? Yes, indeed they can be carried. Why? Because of the continuity of the development project. So keep this in mind that in the 18th Lok Sabha, almost 5,486 crore was allocated under MPLAD fund. The utilization till the publication of the article was only 26%. In 17th Lok Sabha, 75% of the fund was utilized and only 42% of the works were completed. Now some of you like that, sir, then what is the use of this scheme, right? Why we cannot discard it? People are not only creating the works, creating durable community assets or utilizing 100% of the funds. However, the today's article actually argues for no case for scrapping MPLAD funds by giving us different data, where it says that how in 16th Lok Sabha from 2014 to 2019, only 8.7% of the funds remain unused. Even this year, there are certain members who have actually kind of utilized a significant portion, more than 75% of their total funds. The name of them has been mentioned: Sant Balbir Singh, Ikra Chaudhary, Tejasvi Surya. The article also provides a kind of a passing suggestion that how we can actually create or organize short workshops with consultants, with these MPs, to actually tell them that how they can better utilize these projects. As you guys can see here, majority of the projects actually remains in the public infrastructure itself, like creation of railways, roads, bridges, other public facilities like, let's say, toilets under Swachh Bharat Mission, education, drinking water facility, electricity facility. Don't you think we can also direct these MPLAD funds for creation of, let's say, for example, some small renewable energy plants or for installation of photovoltaic solar panels, right? And for that, they shall be actually, kind of socially engineered by some workshops or consultant. That is the idea of the article. With this, we move forward to the next news. Where we'll try to see that what is the procedure for the suspension of the Member of Parliament, which has become a kind of a heated debate. So the standoff between the opposition and the government, it actually intensified on Tuesday when the leader of opposition, which is currently Rahul Gandhi, he stepped up his attacks on the Prime Minister after he was not allowed to quote from or speak about the former Army Chief General Narmane's unpublished memoir. Right? He was basically stopped by the speaker, who said that such unpublished memoir cannot be quoted in the House of Parliament, right? And 8 opposition MPs were actually suspended. Now listen to this very carefully, for the remainder of the budget session. So let's first have a quick look on the position of leader of opposition. Does our constitution anywhere mentions a leader of opposition? The answer is no. The office has actually been, kind of officially recognized under the salaries and allowances of the leader of opposition in the Parliament Act 1977. Who becomes the leader of opposition? The leader of the single largest party after the party which has basically in the government or under the coalition. The criteria is that such a party shall have a strength of at least 10% of the total membership of that house, so that in case of any kind of a meeting, they are able to form the quorum. What is quorum? The 10% of the total strength of the house. So let's say, for example, if in Lok Sabha the total membership right now is 545, a party shall have at least 55 members. Now, is there any uses of being appointed as leader of opposition? Yes. The leader of opposition actually gets an official status, salary and allowances under this provision of Act of 1977 as equivalent to a cabinet minister. He also forms part of key selection committees, Central Bureau of Investigation, Central Vigilance Commission, Central Election Commission, as it was also suggested by the A. Baranwal judgment 2023, where basically the Supreme Court also included the Chief Justice of India in the selection committee for Chief Election Commissioner. A simple question to all of you: does Chief Justice of India forms part of the committee which selects Chief Election Commissioner or not? He also forms the part of the committee which basically selects Lokpal. Also, he is consulted by the Speaker on the formation of the various parliamentary standing committees. So when we have studied, you have kind of understood the leader of opposition, let's try to understand the procedure for suspension of MPs in the Lok Sabha. Okay? So basically, the Speaker of Lok Sabha or Chairman of Rajya Sabha, they have an important responsibility, right, as per the constitutional mandate, that they are required to maintain the order for the smooth functioning of the house, right? Like for example, whatever freedom of speech and expression you have under Article 19 of the Constitution, on similar lines, there are certain kind of freedoms which are exercised by the parliamentarians as well, called as parliamentary privileges under Article 105 of the Constitution. Just like how your freedom of speech and expression can be curtailed if you are disrupting public order, which is not defined and thus ambiguous in the nature, in a similar fashion, the kind of the Speaker of Lok Sabha can also, to maintain that order under the provision of Article 118, can actually, kind of suspend you. So under Article 118, each house can actually make rules to regulate the procedures and conduct of the business. So remember that there does not exist any kind of a separate statute in our country like other countries. For example, some Parliament Discipline Act or something. It is basically a kind of a layman provision which has been created under Article 118. And following that Article 105, the parliamentary privileges and the kind of conduct of business under Article 118, there are certain rules which has been made by the Lok Sabha for the conduct of the business. What are the rules? First is Rule 373. Rule 373 is, let's say for example, you said something which could not have been said on the House of Parliament, and thus there will be an immediate withdrawal for the remainder of that day's sitting only. Right? So Speaker will be like कि ले जाओ इस आदमी को, ठीक, कल आना वापस. That is Rule 373. In Rule 374, let's say you said something, right, which is kind of very provocative in the nature, which can actually disrupt public order. So in that case, there is a motion which will be moved by the Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs for the suspension of this member for the remainder of session as it has taken place. Then there is Rule 374A, which was actually included in the year of 2001, where there is a kind of an automatic suspension. So let's say for example, there are certain rules which were created that you cannot come into the well of house, you cannot shout some slogans, right, or you cannot obstruct the proceedings deliberately without any purpose. If you do that, you can either be suspended for 5 days or you can be suspended for the remainder of the session. Now remember a judgment, that is Rajaram Pal versus Speaker of Lok Sabha, where Supreme Court actually upheld the Parliament's power to discipline the members and said that even the parliamentary privileges under Article 105 is subject to judicial review on two grounds. One is illegality and the other is unconstitutionality. Now keep this in mind that it has actually become a kind of a tool to curb the voice of opposition in the recent years. For example, the suspended Lok Sabha MP count nearly doubles during the NDA terms. Just look at the kind of a stark rise in the suspension of such MPs which are taking place, and also keep this in mind. The decorum and the seriousness of the proceedings of the House require that there shall be no thank you, Jai Hind or Vande Mataram kind of a slogans which you can actually raise in the House. So even if you are saying the national song Vande Mataram, it can actually obstruct the proceedings and you can be suspended. So keep these things in your mind and we move forward to the next news. where we are actually going to refer to some very important data which has been published today, and in relation to that we'll also cover a very important scheme, and that is Namaste, right? That is the name of the scheme. So first and foremost, what is the context? The Union government on Tuesday actually released the data for the first time on the ongoing enumeration of waste pickers which is taking place across the country, showing that a total of 1.5 lakh such workers had been profiled. So remember that there are 1.5 lakh workers in our country, also the part of the demographic dividend, who are actually working as the waste pickers in our country, and validated so far in the urban areas of 35 states and UTs. So when we talk at the national level, right, remember this very important data when you are writing on the issues of caste in your GS1 paper, 84% of overall waste pickers were actually from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe and other backward classes, while 10% actually belong from the communities in the general category. So how many people have been profiled? 1.52 lakh. 85% or 84.5% are from SC, ST and OBC. However, in metropolitan or cosmopolitan cities like for example Goa and Delhi, a majority of such workers actually come from general communities. So about 48.7% of such waste pickers are actually women, 51% are men and 0.007% are transgender. The data has been released by the Social Justice Ministry or Ministry of Social Justice. Okay. So what is this scheme Namaste? National Action for Mechanized Sanitation Ecosystem, under which, let's say for example, we are also talking about the Bandi Court in the context of Kerala. The scheme is implemented by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, where it kinds of aims to eliminate death due to manual and hazardous cleaning of sewers and septic tanks, to actually implement the provisions of Prohibition of Employment as Manual Scavengers Act of 2013, which if we are able to implement in its true spirit, it will actually help us to achieve two important sustainable development goals. One is SDG 8, which provides for decent work, and then there is SDG 10, which provides for reduced inequalities. Remember that under this Namaste scheme, there is a kind of a capital subsidy of 5 lakh rupees per worker, where to actually so that the worker can purchase sanitation related automated vehicles, mechanized equipments under the Swachhata Udyami Yojana. Very recently I came across such a person who under this scheme has actually brought such mechanized equipment, and the road which he was cleaning, the road had so many potholes that the machine was not even able to move in that. So at the end of the time, after trying for several times, that person had to kind of come down and then clean it by the hand itself. So what is the purpose of having such machines? Also, the profiling of sewer, septic and tank worker is taking place. Occupation safety training is being provided to them. Support for safety devices to emergency response sanitation units will be done. Health insurance coverage will be actually expanded under Ayushman Bharat Yojana. The kind of the convergence of Ministry of Social Justice and Housing Urban Affairs programs will take place as well, and there will be a kind of a dedicated website for profiling, occupational safety purposes for such workers. So keep these provisions in your mind, and we move forward to the next news. So, in the budget 2026, the government has basically proposed to create a kind of a turtle trails, right? So, let's say for example, you are a person who is an enthusiast knowing about the various kinds of flora and fauna of our country, and you come across a social media video where you see basically there is a kind of a mass nesting of these turtles which are taking place on the coast of Odisha, and you really want to visit it. So the government is basically trying to promote such ecotourism through these turtle trails along the key nesting sites in the coastal areas of Odisha, Karnataka and Kerala. However, this initiative which has been proposed in the budget has actually kind of triggered a sharp skepticism and concern among the conservationists and researchers, who argue that such mass nesting sites should be kept free from anthropogenic pressure. So if UPSC gives you a term and says Aribada, recently seen in the news, is related to which of the following? Aribada is basically the mass nesting of olive ridley sea turtle. Now listen very carefully. It is recorded only along India and Costa Rica and some handful of beaches. So not only in India. Odisha bird actually act as the world's largest mass nesting ground for olive ridley turtles, where last year in the span of 8 days 7 lakh ridley turtles actually laid down the eggs in this Rushikulya rookery. So now look here, this is a kind of one very important aspect, one very important location, and that is Gahirmat Sanctuary. And then here is the Rushikulya river. On the mouth of it there exists another mass nesting site. So that is Gahirmat in Kendrapara and Rushikulya in the Ganjam district. The conservationists are saying that please declare these two important areas which are very kind of imperative for the Aribada, declare them as a kind of a no-go zone. Government is saying that see, anyway in this Gahirmat there is a kind of a no outsider is allowed. Why? Because it lies in the proximity of the missile testing range of the Chandipur. So here there is a no problem. Why we cannot promote some kind of ecotourism here, right, on the mouth of this Rushikulya river? The point is that keep this in mind that this olive ridley turtle is actually listed as vulnerable in the IUCN Red List in Appendix 1 of the sites and in the Schedule 1 of the WPA 1972, under which the government has to ensure to provide them the highest level of protection. Now this is your olive ridley turtle, the smallest and the most abundant of all sea turtle species. The other sea turtles in our country include green sea turtle, hawksbill, leatherback turtle and loggerhead turtle. Their habitat in India traditionally found in large numbers on the eastern coast. The highest number of mass nesting happens in Odisha, but they are also found in the region of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh as well. Categorized as vulnerable. Rate of survival, however, is very low. So for example, this huge number which we were referring to, in more than 1000 hatchling which enters the seawater, only one survives to adulthood. And that's why they are actually listed on the Schedule 1 of the WPA. So keep all of these provisions in your mind, and also the Operation Olivia, which was actually launched by the Indian Coast Guard to protect olive ridley turtles along the Odisha coastline. We have covered all the aspects of the prelims examination, and with this we have reached to the end of our discussion today. Do not forget to attempt the questions at the end of the video and test your knowledge. We will meet in a very interesting discussion very soon. Till then, all the very best for your preparation, and thank you.